Texas. We're in Arlington.
This is not to warn, not to warn.
You think that I'm running in place? Y'all really testing my patience.
Let's go.
I don't care now, it's pedal to the metal. I can never quit now, I will never.
Everyone here believes and knows that the XFL is the league of tomorrow, and that starts today. That starts with all of you.
We all got a story to tell. Tell yours today, all right? Don't leave anything out there today.
All of you can relate to being number 54. You all got different numbers on your chest, but today, you're number 54. Your backs are up against the wall. There's nowhere to go but forward. And the hunger that created in me, who's hungry?
What is up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the XFL Week in Review. I'm your host, Mark Perry, editor of XFL News Hub, your spring football media guru that you just heard from the Texas Showcase. You heard Danny Garcia. You heard from The Rock. Then that other clip, that was from the announcement, the town hall, if you will, afterwards, and that was the crowd's reaction. They were, you heard the chant, XFL, XFL. People are super excited about it. We are super excited about bringing you the XFL, all the latest XFL news up. So we got news on the XFL TV deal. We have a whole big thing about MLFB, that Major League Football that we've talked about on the show, and what happened this past week. You're not going to want to miss that. That's some crazy stuff. I got video you've probably not seen. So I've got that. Also, XFL Insider, the Adam Schefter, or the Mike Mitchell is I don't know, however you want to call it, the GOAT. We'll get into that. Mike Mitchell is on the program answering a bunch of questions that I had, talking about everything that has gone on and what is to come when it comes to team names, when that's going to be announced. We talk about that. We talk about who the highest paid player in the XFL was. We'll get into all that. And so much, tons of stuff with the great one, the XFL Insider, Mike Mitchell. But before we get involved with the show, we got to say, if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@XFL News Hub with your thoughts, record an MP3 or video on your phone. We'll play it on next week's show. We got a couple of them today. Leave a voicemail, 888-430-7692, extension 3. And leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We're on Stitcher, Audible Player, FM, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts. We do have a review. This one comes in, gives us 5 stars. That's what I'm talking about. The Dog SWP. Absolutely love the podcast. XFL baby! Exclamation point. We appreciate the Dog SWP. I'm not sure if you are friends with my dog Finn or not, but he spelled it with a D-A-W-G. So maybe you're not friends with my dog Finn. But if you want to watch the show live, XFL Week in Review, live at 8 p.m. Eastern every Monday on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. And of Timeline, of course, we've got the November 2022 XFL Draft. Then we've got, we're now hearing it's in the middle of November. We'll get Mike Mitchell will talk about that. January 9th, 2023, XFL training camp begins. And then February 18th, 2023, the XFL season begins. 201 days till XFL kickoff. Can you believe that? And, of course, last week they announced the cities, if you haven't heard, Seattle, Houston, San Antonio, Las Vegas, Dallas, St. Louis, D.C., and Orlando. There you have it. Speaking of the cities, I just wanted to show you that I am for real. And it is not that it was an emotional thing, but it was kind of like just God is good. And, these things, happen, but you got to be patient, all this kind of stuff. But I actually put in, that's right, if you're watching on the YouTube stream, that is a picture of my season ticket deposit for the XFL DC, probably DC Defenders team season ticket. I put in a deposit, so you should too. Heard that the tickets were moving well from what I've heard so far. But I put in my season ticket deposit, and it was crazy for me because, going to the games, super excited, what shuts down the world, and thinking that was it, that it would never happen again. And then The Rock, Danny Garcia buy the XFL, but then there's an opportunity that maybe they choose to go into a different city, like what happened with LA, but I knew DC was a good spot. We've got the beer snake, so that is going to come back. I cannot wait for that first game. So there we have it. So you have I put in a deposit. It was just crazy to think. I mean, how many things that you know of, especially when it comes to sports leagues, that goes out of business but then comes back in a couple years. It's crazy. So I was very happy to put in my deposit. You should too. Get on that. So also what you should do, not only should you put your season ticket deposit in now, it's only $50 a ticket. And then I'm sure the prices are going to be kind of the same as it was before, like $25 a game or something like that. Also, speaking of that, we also have how the tickets break down with St. Louis. We have that. That came out today. But before we get into all that stuff, you got to make sure that if you like spring football, if you like alt football, which is anything but the NFL, smash the like button right now. Let's get this show up to 60 likes, please. And subscribe to the channel. We'll keep you up to date on all the XFL news out there as we load up and get ready for the 2023 season. Also, what's going to be super fun is that, not only do you have USFL players, but some XFL players are in NFL camps. So we get a chance to see them in preseason. And I'm super excited. This is the first week of preseason. Do we get XFL team names this week? I don't know. The first preseason game is on Thursday. I know it's the Raiders against somebody. Let me know in the chat who it is. So we have that. So you can be able to have a chance to watch USFL players. Because remember, there's a chance that those USFL players will not only go back to the USFL, but some of them, depending on how their contract was written, or how they, if they signed the waiver, whatever, they could wind up in the XFL as well. So it's a lot of fun stuff going on there. We've got a ton of news to get to between player contracts. We got a comparison. Andy Murray gave us a comparison of between the XFL and USFL. I thought was interesting. Details on St. Louis and how they're the Dome and who's paying for what and ticket sales and all that stuff. And, of course, the craziness that was Major League Football this week. You're not going to want to miss that. And plus, the great one, Mike Mitchell, also XFL Insider, super writer for XFL News Hub, USFL News Hub, CFL News Hub. Maybe I can get him to write for Pro Wrestling News Hub, which, by the way, I just want to point it out. We all know everything that happened with Vince McMahon. I heard SummerSlam was really good. I decided that now that Vince McMahon is gone from the WWE, and Triple H is in charge of creative, which I loved Triple H when he was in charge of NXT. I loved NXT. Going back to the Kevin Owens, Sammy, I want to say Sammy Kershaw, but that's not it. Sami Zayn era. I loved that. And then, of course, those guys got moved up and Vince ruins them, and we know the history. But now that he's gone, so Pro Wrestling News Hub is now going to cover not only AEW, but also WWE. And that's something that we decided with the guys there as well. All right, so we've got a huge ton of show, plus your social media stuff. Plus, we'll say hello to everybody in the chat in a little bit. But before, let's just, without further ado, folks, let's just get into the tons of news in the week that is the XFL. So last week, the XFL discusses player salaries, the XFL Drafted Timeline. This is from our man, Anthony Miller. So XFL Senior Vice President of Player Personnel, Doug Whaley, and Senior Director of Player Administration and Officiating Operations, that's a long title, Russ Giglio, spoke with agents last Monday regarding player compensation, the XFL Draft, and the timeline for the 2023 season. The meeting consisted of in-depth details regarding what players will be paid for the upcoming season. Both Whaley and Giglio spoke as well regarding the XFL Draft and how they are working through the evaluation and drafting process. The timeline for the upcoming season and how it will play out was also discussed, as many have a better idea of how it will all work. So first, the XFL Draft details. With the 6 XFL player showcases complete, the Director of Player Personnel and Scouts are now evaluating all the players that were in the showcases. DPPs, not DDP, are heading to NFL camps now to evaluate players that could be good fits for the XFL. One note that was mentioned is because of the high turnouts, there's a possibility that another showcase could be scheduled sometime in the future. This isn't the special teams when the specialists will have their camp hosted by former NFL kicker Nick Novak on October 23rd, which could possibly be the date range of a potential 7th player showcase, something to keep in mind. As mentioned at the XFL Town Hall last week, the draft will be occurring sometime in mid-November. Not the beginning of November, but mid-November. The league is still working out how they would like to format the draft, but it appears it could end up being positional. There were mentions of there being positional, potential 2 or 3 supplemental drafts that take place afterwards to fill the roster spots. When it comes down to the size of the draft, Whaley mentioned potentially doing roughly 55 to 60 rounds of players being drafted to save room for other players to be signed afterwards. The draft pool doesn't necessarily consist of players who were at showcases, as it could be a mixture of both. Players who were previously with the XFL and not currently under contracts could be contacted to be part of the draft pool. All players apart from the draft pool must not be under contract with any other league. I don't know if they're going to put players back in old teams that they were in before. I doubt it, to be honest. Just kind of the season really never finished, and it would be interesting if players played again in their same cities, but I'm not sure if that's going to work out this time. The director of player personnel is evaluating quarterbacks and bringing them to the XFL. The league is working out whether they want them drafted by teams or marry them to a specific team. They're hoping to take the same approach as the 2020 XFL by signing a quarterbacks off the bat to be in the league. So they're not sure how they're going to do that. Are they going to do a draft, or are they going to sign them to a team? They did assign them before. It seemed to be easier, but again, it didn't really work out too well per se. Some guys got injured, some guys didn't play or started, and then other people came in, so we'll see how that goes. Their pay will be different from other players, but no details as far as how much they will be paid. XFL quarterbacks who are signed are considered higher paid, will not be eligible to leave for the NFL until the end of the season or contract. The league expects to an announcement of quarterback decisions by September. So we should be hearing what's the deal with the quarterbacks in a month. That's right, in a month. Keep that in mind. An interesting note is how the XFL is emphasizing the development of quarterbacks in their league. They will have quarterback personnel that will work with quarterbacks at least 3 or 4 times a month. The focus during these sessions is working on their mechanics on the field and studying film/classroom work off the field. Interesting. So XFL training camp and roster details. Each team will go into training camp with 66 players on their roster. Their plans are to have a mini camp sometime in December that could last 4 to 5 days in Arlington. An estimated start of training camp will be January 8th or 9th, located around the Arlington area. So mini camp, some kind of thing in December, that's for a couple days. Remember, in the XFL 2.0 era, they had these mini camps. They weren't in the centrally located, but they were in their cities. So I wonder if it seems like they'll do that in Arlington as well. So mini camp, fly everybody to Arlington, kind of work out the kinks, get together for a week or so, then head home, and then come back in January 2023. 5 weeks will be the length of the training camp, which is 1 week longer than it previously was back in 2020. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind, and also way longer than the USFL did. Cut down for rosters will occur either February 8th or 9th, as the size will decrease to 50 players. On game day, each team will have 45 active players on the roster to play in the game. No free agency will exist with the XFL, as they signed players accordingly. The league is going to have a regular season that consists of 10 weeks of games. The postseason will be 2 weeks long, which includes the championship game played on the weekend of May 6th. So the May the 4th, be with you, will be 2 days later, and then the XFL championship game. Very cool. They haven't picked a date for the championship game, as they're trying to decide whether they want to have the game before or after the Kentucky Derby. There was something about the lead-in with the Kentucky Derby that could help interest, and especially to have the Kentucky Derby first. The Kentucky Derby is over at 4 o'clock, the XFL game at night. That could be a nice little lead-in there for the XFL. So player contract details. Each player in the XFL will receive a salary, though the Kentucky Derby, I think, is on NBC. So that might be an issue there. Usually it is, isn't it? I don't know. Each player in the XFL will receive a salary of $59,000 for the season with an additional $20,000 of additional benefits. So you could make almost $80,000. The additional benefits include health insurance, housing, and meals as they are covered by the league. So here's a breakdown of the contract pays for players. At least a one-year contract, total salary $59,000, $800 per week for players during training camp. That's way more than MLFB paid. Players will receive $5,000 per game and $1,000 bonus for winning the game. $1,500 a week for players who are inactive. They will receive a bonus for their team winning. Playoff bonuses are unknown but would be considered significant amounts for winning. Contracts won't be signed prior to the XFL draft. Another talking point regarding players and their contract was the NFL Alumni Academy's partnership with the XFL. This is designed to have players who are ready to go to replace injured players in the NFL. There will be a 3-week program in Arlington, Texas at Choctaw Stadium where players will receive life skill courses and on-the-field courses to prepare them for their play at football at any time. The player pool will roughly be 200 to 300 players in it. Any player apart from the academy that isn't on an NFL roster at the end of the season will have the option to opt into an XFL contract. This is to ensure that they automatically have a spot in the XFL. So what do you think of the players' pay? I think all of this stuff sounds good. One of the things that's been kind of out there that we haven't really had confirmation yet is that I believe that they are only signing one-year contracts. That they basically could go play in the XFL and then go right into the USFL if they wanted to, where the USFL is locking players in for a 2-year commitment. It looks like the XFL, which is doing something than the 2.0 era, is allowing players to just, they play 1 year and then that's it. You go do whatever you want. We're not begging you to stay. So that's just something to keep in mind. And giving the players freedom is actually kind of a good thing. And I was a little surprised to hear that. For those claiming that the XFL got no money from their deal with ESPN, clearly they have no idea what they're talking about because no one really knows. However, somebody might know. Daniel Kaplan and Bill Shea of The Athletic recently published a lengthy article about if the XFL and USFL can coexist or need to merge. They talk about both leagues, where they came from, how they are now. The article includes quotes from people in the sports business world. They discuss if there is an appetite for year-round football and if leagues will merge at some point. There were a couple of interesting tidbits about the XFL in that, something fans have been wondering for some time. Did they, XFL, get money from Disney this time, or did the league make a similar deal like they did back in 2020? We learned from The Atlantic that the deal between the XFL and ABC, Disney, ESPN includes money. Quote, the new XFL has the weight of ESPN behind it. When the league announced its 8 home markets, ESPN sent out a push notification. The parties won't comment on their economics of the deal, but a source said there is a rights fee. Goes on to say, quote, there is substantial income from day one. The source texted of the ESPN contract, who then compared the league's strategy to the 2020 startup version. But every aspect of the overall plan is better, from the way they will leverage their new owners, which include Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, to the way they see the game being played, to the TV deals, to the marketplaces they choose, to the way they're housing players, to fan engagement plans. So this person from ESPN said that it's a substantial income that they're getting from this deal. Mike Mitchell is going to have more of that stuff later on in the week, so stay tuned to XFL News Hub for that. But every aspect of the overall plan is better than it was in the original version. That's something to keep in mind. That's kind of interesting. They also mentioned the ad money coming in from the XFL. Will there be enough money for both the XFL and USFL and XFL to coexist in 2023? I remember they're both coming in. But where's this ad money coming from? So, quote, this year, USFL games generated around $65 million in TV advertising revenue for Fox and NBC, according to EDO, a New York-based advertising metrics data firm that tracks commercial engagement. In 2020, ads during XFL games ginned up $50 million during the truncated season, but were more effective than USFL in-game ads, the firm said. Interesting. EDO data shows that TV viewers were 30% more engaged with ads during the shortened XFL season in 2020 than the USFL season in 2022. The question with those numbers is that was 2022. Things are a lot different now after you know what. People's television habits are different now. You get my drift. Can the XFL 3.0 era bring the same interest or better? Something we're going to have to find out. Now, the next question is whether advertisers will spend on the XFL and USFL, basically at the same time. The USFL already sold 50% ads sold for its 2023 season. Quote, while brands will certainly manage their overall ad frequency during XFL and USFL games, there's no known downside to investing in both environments. Grover said, airing head-to-head ads will undoubtedly impact brands' performance, but going into the season, we expect XFL has an advantage, given it has a proven to be stronger environment for advertising. Interesting. In the end, for both leagues, it comes down to who has the better business model, who is willing to lose money, and how much in the beginning. We'll find out when the XFL kicks off in February 2023 and the USFL later in April. So for anybody asking who didn't know what they were talking about, did the XFL get some money? Now, do we know what it is? No. I have a feeling Mike Mitchell might know, but we'll have to wait for that report. But it is definitely more than what they got in the XFL 2.0 era, and that is a good sign. Did the XFL drop a little subtle hint of former team colors returning? Did you see this? So when the XFL had its very first town hall, where they announced the area teams and the cities and locations they would be playing in 2023, after the official city announced, they assigned each coaching staff to a particular city. And we know each team's names, logos, or branding, but the XFL possibly dropped some hints on social media and their website when they released the announcement. So you got Bob Stoops in Arlington, light blue. Doesn't that look like the Renegades colors? The XFL not only teased a possible return of specific teams for the 2020 season, but even put the primary colors of those locations behind each head coach. First, we got the Arlington team, where Bob Stoops will coach again. This time, the Arlington team, instead of the former Dallas team, the head coach, as we can see behind him, shows the very light blue shade. Here are the remaining 7 cities and coach graphics, each with the primary color in their photos. St. Louis, Anthony Becht. Doesn't that look like the Battlehawks blue? Looks like that to me. Now, San Antonio. This one is interesting. Yellow, of course, there is the yellow in the Steelers for Hines Ward and San Antonio, but we don't know the name of the San Antonio franchise. So their color is yellow. That's going to be interesting. So that was the new one. Of course, with the Steelers, he was with 13 years with the Steelers. Does this most likely be a brand new team and color scheme? And it could be something that Hines Ward put his 2 cents in and suggestions of the new franchise. We don't know. Clearly, it doesn't match the San Antonio Commanders colors, so don't worry about that. Either way, definitely San Antonio is going to get a new color scheme, new team name. That we'll have to see with that, but their primary color is yellow. Seattle, green, back at it again. The Seattle Dragons, the color does match the green from the colors from the Dragons. So would we see the Dragons again? I don't see why not. Washington, D.C., Reggie Barlow, my guy. That's my coach. Got the red and white DC Defenders. They were red. I think that's what they'll go back to. Maybe just a little tweaking of the logos. We'll have to find out. But the DC Defenders keeping that red primary logo. Las Vegas, another new team. Remember, we thought maybe Las Vegas could be technically considered, the Wildcats or whatever. They're saying the light red behind Rod Woodson, similar to the LA Wildcats, but there's a darker tone red, and their primary color was orange. It could be like San Antonio and be a brand new team coming to Las Vegas, and that will not represent any previous team like New York or Los Angeles, who are no longer part of it. Now, this is the thing. I don't think they're going to use the Wildcats or Guardians names because they could bring the Wildcats and Guardians back. Orlando, Terrell Buckley got that bright green. That's the same green as the Tampa Bay Vipers that they played with in 2020. So maybe Orlando is just the Orlando Vipers. I don't see why not keeping it there. Houston, dark blue, identical to the Roughnecks logo and the colors but we all know that the Roughnecks name could stay. It's just the logo needs to change differently. So there you have, so we'll have to see how that comes out. So there's a lot of hints in these things, but definitely the new franchises, it looks like all the new franchises are going to get a new colors and new team names. I think San Antonio and Las Vegas will basically be the new ones. I think Orlando will just be the Vipers. We'll have to find out. When we find out, that's the question. Is it in the next month? Is it the next couple weeks? Is it the next 2-3 months? We'll just have to find out. But at least maybe they'll be giving us more hints down the road. Details on the XFL's agreement with the Dome in St. Louis: rent, ticket sales, revenue, sponsorship, all sorts of stuff. So Nathan Robalicki of the St. Louis Business Journal has some information on the upcoming XFL season in St. Louis. It includes details about the XFL playing in the Dome of Americas at America Center. According to Robalicki, the XFL will pay the same rent as they did in 2020. Quote, the XFL will pay $100,000 per game for its St. Louis franchise to play 5 regular season home games at the Dome at America Center. According to a license agreement the Startup Professional Football League has with Explore St. Louis, the city's Convention and Visitors Commission, which operates the Dome. Close quote. The XFL and the Dome at America Center agreement are for 3 years. So everything is kind of this 3-year agreement. The XFL will also be responsible for some other game day items. Quote, in addition to paying rent, the XFL will be responsible for covering game day expenses, including staffing for the facilities, maintenance, and ticketing operations, and public safety and security costs. Remember, the XFL hired a security guy just to do this job. Explore St. Louis will provide the XFL with turf installation. Good. I'm glad you're paying the turf installation. Lighting for the game, that would be kind of messed up. Game level lighting during the football games, heating and cooling, and free public internet access during the game. Well, that's good. I'm going to games, man, and you go into stadiums and you can't get a signal because there's so many phones at one location. In addition, we learn a little bit more about the ticket revenue structure of the XFL. Quote, the XFL will keep all ticket revenue after deduction of tax and fees and will sell its tickets for St. Louis games through Ticketmaster as part of an agreement Explore St. Louis has with the ticket sale company. It is to provide 200 free tickets and 3 complimentary suites and prime viewing locations for Explore St. Louis. Cool, so that this Explore St. Louis can give them away. The agreement includes an incentive section that gives the XFL an opportunity to earn a rebate on its ticket sales if it hits certain attendance metrics at the Dome. If more than 10,000 tickets are scanned for a single game, the XFL will receive a $1 rebate, so they basically get $10,000. The rebate increases to $2 per ticket if more than 20,000, so they could get $40,000, which is pretty good if tickets are scanned for a single game. So that's going to be boots on the ground trying to get that kind of money that will help ticket sales, will help the XFL get a little bit of rebate from, they're all getting the ticket sales, but then making a little bit more off of it. The XFL will also be able to sell in-game sponsorship deals and keep 100% of the revenue. So they can do any kind of sponsorships they want. And this is probably the same thing that's going to be with a lot of the other stadium deals. It's kind of this kind of incentive base. The article also talks about XFL merchandise during the games, who will handle concessions, and what the St. Louis Rams paid per game back in the day. So if you want to check out more of the article, you just head over to St. Louis Business Journal or XFL News Hub. You click on the link there. But those are the details of the agreement with the Dome in St. Louis. Some very interesting things there. You see how complicated it is to start up a league. But luckily, the 2-point era laid the groundwork, and these guys just have to pick up the ball and just keep running and make adjustments. So our own Andy Murray put this one together: XFL versus USFL player salary breakdowns, base pay comparison, housing, and meals. Thought this was interesting. So monetary compensation and alternative football leagues is a pertinent topic for players and fans wanting to know what non-NFL players can get. While they will be pale in comparison to the millions and millions an NFL player receives, they can still provide a respectable wage that keeps athletes from hanging up the cleats. During the Zoom call last week, XFL Vice President of Player Personnel Doug Whaley, Executive Vice President of Football Operations Mark Ross, and Senior Director of Player Administration and Fishing and Aiding Details Russ Giglio detailed more aspects of the upcoming thing. And then we learned about the player salaries, accommodations, coaches, team personnel, roster size. It became more apparent that the XFL players would be better compensated across the board in multiple earnings categories compared to the USFL counterpart. So here are some key details disclosed about the player contract. So, of course, the base player salary. The initial numbers detailed on were called that the players would earn $5,000 per week during the regular season, with inactive players taking home $1,500. Training camp rosters would start at 66, and each participant accumulating $800 per week starting January 8th. This is the base salary, though quarterbacks are expected to command a higher wage, potentially even the six-figure range. All USFL players on active rosters made $4,500 per week, or $45,000 for the 10-week regular season. Practice squads players acquired $1,500 per week, while training camp players made $600 per week. So the XFL basically saw what they did and just kind of bumped it up a little bit. Now, similar to the 2.0 era, XFL players will earn $1,000 for each win. It is not currently known how much playoff bonuses will be in the 3.0 era. USFL players took home $850 per victory. Do you see what's going on here? The Birmingham Stallions were awarded $10,000 per player in their victory over the Philadelphia Stars on July 3rd. Now, roster depth, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's mantra of being the 54 on a 53-man ex-NFL permeates through the league. This begs the question of how many player 54s will be on the XFL rosters. During the Zoom meeting, it was confirmed that rosters will carry 50 players, 45 per active per week. This once again trumps the USFL's 40 active man rosters, which initially debuted at 38 at the beginning of the 2020 season. Then they made adjustments. Coaches, players were complaining, and then they made adjustments on the fly. This will allow for more flexibility in assessing which positions require more depth instead of forcing positions to be combined, like how the USFL had punters doubling duty as place kickers. In addition, an injury replacement pool will be based on the XFL's hub in Arlington. It is not designated as a Team 9, it was in previous iterations with the league. So there is no Team 9 in the XFL 2.0, 3.0 era. And I don't think there was really a Team 9 either when it comes to the USFL. So they just ditched that idea. Accommodations. So the housing and meals will be provided by the XFL at no additional cost. For the players for the USFL during training camp, all players stayed for free. During the regular season, the USFL picked up half the hotel bills for players who wanted to stay. So players paid $75 a night for their hotel room. Other players rented homes or apartments in the Birmingham area. And for the USFL playoffs, the league paid for the lodging bills. But the XFL is covering everything, housing and meals at no additional cost. So these figures display a willingness from the XFL ownership to entice players to choose their league over the USFL. How they will factor into long-term financial calculations moving forward remains to be seen. Will the USFL make adjustments for their 2023 season? 2023 is going to be fun and interesting year for spring football. It will be very interesting to see how the USFL, now that they have the knowledge of what the XFL is doing, do they make any adjustments, or they just stick to the status quo and let the XFL spend more money than them? All of this will play out in 2023. The XFL trademarks a website to include a metaverse, augmented reality, and NFTs. Yes, you people that get NFTs and you're like, I'm going to quit now. I'm not going to watch this because NFTs. We can go into the whole thing about, just because somebody, just because you don't like something, then you have to quit, which is kind of a cultural thing over the last 5 years or so. But you don't understand NFTs. That's why. News from the XFL is coming in hot. So Sunday, of course, they announced cities and venues. Monday morning, they announced the city of Arlington as the football hub. In a press release, of course, they said about the hub, the XFL hub will also serve as an around-the-clock content engine, offering behind-the-scenes storytelling of the league, its players, and its owners, allowing the league to experiment with different kinds of engagement. Traditional media, podcasts, social media will drive fan interest while also elevating the story and individual brands of the players. Danny Garcia, XFL chairwoman and owner, said about the hub, quote, unlocked a new level of fan engagement never seen before, close quote. Now, the XFL dropped a new trademark that might have something to do with this new level of fan engagement. It deals with a new website that includes the metaverse, augmented reality, NFTs, and more. We don't have to go kind of through all of this, but virtual goods is in the field of sports and entertainment. Virtual goods in the nature of downloadable augmented reality works, artwork, avatars, character, clothing, digital animated and non-animated designs and characters, digital overlays, metahumans, non-fungible tokens, virtual tokens, all for use in a metaverse, online and virtual environments. You get the idea. So it's kind of this metaverse kind of thing. Is this big, long thing. Subscription to a television channel, namely continuing subscription video program in the field of sports broadcast over the internet and continuing subscription audio program in the field of football broadcast over the internet. Online retail services featuring virtual goods in the field of sports and entertainment. Some kind of interesting things there. Entertainment services, namely probably a metaverse experience and providing an online virtual environment in which users can interact for sports, recreational, leisure, or entertainment purposes. Entertainment services, metaverse, blah, 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 blah. And providing an interactive website that they can buy, sell, trade, and safeguard virtual goods, including NFTs, blah, 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 blah. So we should be getting more XFL news in the coming days and weeks. Danny Garcia has said during Sunday's town hall event that fans would co-create with the league with media content that fans have not seen before. Now, this trademark could have something to do with that. So exciting times are ahead for the XFL. The XFL names Jeff Alstatler as Vice President of Communications. So the XFL announced that Jeff Alstatler has joined the league as Vice President of Communications. He will lead the day-to-day communication operations, align the league's public and media relations strategies with its priorities to drive awareness and build team and player visibility on a national and local level. Report to Janet Dutch, Chief Marketing and Content Officer of the former president of the New York Guardians. Quote, "We are excited to welcome such an experienced communication professional to the team. Jeff will draw on his over 2 decades of sports business and media experience to help implement and lead our national and local media strategy," says Russ Brandon, XFL president of the XFL. He will play a critical role in integrating the XFL within our 8 markets, cultivating relationships with media like me at XFL and us at XFL News Hub, and overseeing each of our team's communication functions. In his role, Alstatler will work with senior leaders across all business units and football operations to develop communication strategies and execute plans that will advance the league's objectives with a focus on protecting, shaping, and telling the XFL story in a compelling, creative, and unexpected ways. Interesting. He will oversee each of the 8 teams' media relation functions and support teams' local footprint while scaling nationally. He'll also lead efforts in identifying reputational issues and provide real-time support regarding enterprise-level events, including business transactions, material announcements, and crisis situations at both the league and team levels. Quote, "We are thrilled to officially welcome Jeff to the XFL. His communication vision and unique perspective on the sports media landscape will help us explore different avenues in which to tell the XFL story," added Dutch. There is much more to come as we look to deeply engage with our fans in the cities our teams will play in. I'm looking forward to working closely with Jeff to elevate the XFL. Now, he brings over 20 years of sports business and public relation experience to the role of Vice President of Communications for the XFL. Before joining the XFL, Alstatler was most recently the Director of Publicity for the sports betting operating PointsBet USA. I've heard of them. Overseeing the company's earning media coverage, public relations, and corporate communications. Previously, he worked at the United States Golf Association, USGA, in various public relations positions, working on long-term and event-driven communication strategy. He also served as Senior Director of Communications for the New Jersey Devils, handling media and player relations, received a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University. Of course, we know when the XFL kickoff, February 2018, 2023. So now we have all the kind of front office things, and now things are starting to trickling down. What I'm hearing is that there's going to be more coming from the XFL as far as announcements, but now we're getting into like the social media and the communications, and we got the HR. We've got all these things as they build out this league as we move closer to the 2023 kickoff. So look for more names and people getting hired by the XFL as we move forward.
Bro, they just canceled our opportunity, bro. Literally just knocked on the door. So what y'all niggas gonna do?
Yeah, no, I do too. I gotta get my shoulder pads, my first piece, all that shit.
Bro, what the fuck? How we gonna get there? How we gonna get all our stuff out the locker room?
Well, like, we need to make sure the locker room gets opened.
So yeah, niggas, they not paying for nothing.
It's only so cheap because we're going to Charlotte.
And then y'all in? Yeah, everybody kicked out and outside the door. And they making us find our own way home today. Like Leah just said, everybody gotta go. And you gotta figure out your own way home. Bro, we ain't even get paid. Nothing. I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I'm gonna try to keep y'all updated on everything.
Hello, I'm Bill Lyons. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Major League Football. I know a lot of you are looking for more information from us, information about what's going on and when. But what I really know is that you want the same thing we do, cleats in the grass. A lot has gone on behind the scenes these last few months. With all that work and effort has come a lot of frustration as well. Unexpected delays, mostly on the publicly traded company side, were simply not foreseen. Everything in its time, we have said. Everything done correctly. Do the next right thing. That's what we've tried to accomplish. The need for patience has been great, and you've shown us the strength that we'd asked for. Our equipment managers and field ops guys are in the warehouse right now preparing the equipment to be transported to camp. I would ask everybody to take a breath and know that we're almost there. Major League Football will have cleats in the grass this year. We will have a 2022 season, and we will deliver football and the stories of how the players get there to you.
The league haven't emailed us. We haven't got an official statement from the president. Nothing, man. So it's just, I guess they just left us out to defend for ourselves. So nothing. And I have to pay for a flight ticket. That was $350. So I mean, it's just, all this just been so overwhelming for me.
After the hotel kicked us out, the league, I didn't even see personnel, people from the league even just getting their own Ubers, buy their own flights, and just go on their own way. They ain't ask a player.
Family and my uncle Brandon Watson had paid for me a plane ticket to get here, to get home.
How much was that ticket?
Like $1,000.
$1,000?
Yeah.
So Major League Football misses hotel payments. Players get locked out of their rooms, and then the league shuts down. So first, you heard from a player that, as it was happening, made this TikTok. Then you had, this came back the next day, was their PR person basically saying, oh, no, we're still all in. We're having this season. Just give us some patience. And then you had players in that news report saying that, we can't get home, and everybody just kind of left town. So it happened again. Another football league is built up, making promises to players, coaches, and fans, and folds out of nowhere, leaving players and coaches on their own. It happened with the AAF 3 years ago, and now it has happened again with MLFB, Major League Football, which we were so skeptical about. But I thought they actually showed up and they were going to do stuff, but we'll get into that. So after its much talked about build up to the 2022 season with cleats on the ground or cleats in the grass, whatever it was, they're hiring of notable coaches like former Atlanta Falcons head coach Jerry Glanville. They were updating their website, selling game tickets with their 4 franchises. Major League Football officially basically has run out of money and more likely owes many people money. It all went down this past weekend when players returned to their hotel rooms after practice and were literally locked out of their rooms. MLFB had not paid their hotel bill for 3 weeks. The rumored price tag was around $80,000. The nearly 260 players were left to their rooms. Hotel staff later gave them 30 minutes to clear out their rooms. Simone L., a reporter for WKRG, broke everything down. You're not going to want, this is just incredible. So Major League Baseball, which began practice last week at Ladd-Peebles Stadium, was set to begin games next month in Mobile, Alabama, has been shut down per a coach in the league, stemming in part from unpaid hotel room and reservations. Today, after practice, MLB coaches were in meetings at a team hotel, when hotel officials knocked on the door and informed them to leave immediately. By the time coaches returned to their rooms, hotel officials were knocking on players' doors, informing them to, quote, get out. Hotel room cards were shut off for everybody involved in the MLFB. Hotel officials retrieved luggage for people in the organization if they had not already in their rooms prior to the cards being shut off. WKRG was told this happened to 3 of the 4 team hotels. And she says, I personally left one hotel in Mobile where more than a dozen MLFB players sat in the lobby waiting for rides. One player told me he was not being able to help financially to get home. One coach needing a flight to Illinois also said he is not getting accommodations to go home. Another coach with MLFB stated that the players have only received a small stipend, I've heard it was $50, but were not going to be paid until their first game check. He told me MLFB coaches have been paid at least once at this point. He said, I spoke with a league official in the hotel lobby who told me they were going to try to bring coaches and players back in 2 weeks. Okay. When, quote, stockholder money was approved by the SEC to help fund the league, close quote. Why didn't you get the stockholder money before? And why did you wait now? The league official also told me they were paying for players to get home, which contradicts what she witnessed and was told by players and staff when I pressed the league official about seeing players and coaches ordering Ubers and searching for flights. He told them they, quote, planned on reimbursing them, close quote. Now, we knew the league was in trouble when the COO abruptly left the league days before training camp. Even if players get reimbursed, why would you want to go back? Who would want to go back? Players have options now. It's called the XFL. It's called USFL. It's called Fan Control Football. Outkick.com reached out to Cecil Cherry, former Fan Control Football player and Defensive Player of the Year of the FCF. Cherry said he spoke to CEO Frank Murtha, who was not even in town. Lad People Stadium, where the training camp was held, was paid $30,000 up front. In a statement to WKRG, Mobile Sports Authority said, quote, MSA was informed today that MLFB has not kept their contracted lodging payments up to date with our local hotel partners where the teams and staff are being housed for their 4-team training camp. We understand there have been numerous discussions pertaining to those late payments with MLBF ownership group and with the local hotels being used, but as of today, the required funds needed to continue their housing have not arrived. Therefore, those pertinent hotels had no choice but to terminate their contracts with the MLFB, thereby ending the MLFB training camp in Mobile, Alabama. Did hear there was something that popped up and then disappeared where they were basically saying they asked the hotel to wait till Monday to pay them. And then another one, I don't know if it was true, said something about they used the wrong credit card number or so. I don't know. There's just so much crazy stuff flying out of this whole thing. The United States Football Players Association, which was created after the XFL and AAF shut down, posted the following. Players involved reached out regarding a cancellation postponement and has result being left without housing and several unable to travel home. Players have set up a page to offset the cost. There was a GoFundMe page set up. Coach Terry Shea of the Virginia Armada used his own money to help players during this time. Simone L. said, an MLFB player for the Virginia Armada said Coach Terry Shea is a great dude. He was willing to pay out of his pocket to make sure his players have one more night in a hotel, something you got to respect, be grateful for because other teams are scrambling. The league is different from any other failed attempt with this because it is a publicly traded company. So why start a season when you didn't have the money yet? Who else do they owe money to? The league has yet to make a really official announcement. The video that we played early on is not on the website anymore. But we saved it just for you, just because we wanted it for posterity. Didn't think that they would take it down. So some people think Major League Football is going to somehow return. Would any of these players actually, I mean, there's some desperate guys to get some football time, would actually go if they requested them to, show up at games. It just seems like this whole thing shut down. They have yet to say anything at this point officially, other than there was some kind of official announcement that say they were going to get the league off the ground, but I think that was more to save their tanking stock price. Just a shame. We were giving it a chance, Major League Football. We gave you a chance. Do they try to reconstitute and try it on next year? I doubt it. You never know. And maybe it was a miscommunication, but 3 weeks of not paying your hotel bills. And Frank Murtha was not even, who is the president, he wasn't even in Mobile, Alabama. He was not even there. Seems like, my friends, a big old scam to me. But hey, it's just one man's opinion. I have no official knowledge. I hope it does actually come back. But it's just seems very shady things going down with MLFB. What's up, XFL Army? If you're a fan of the XFL News Hub and you have a telephone, which I know all of you do because you're sitting there playing on your phones all the time, then why not download the XFL News Hub app? That's right, it's on iTunes. It's on Android. We have an Android version and an iPhone version of the XFL News Hub app. So what do you get? You get the latest news from XFL News Hub, the premier source of XFL news in the universe. Plus, you get push notifications when we have breaking news. You will be the first to know. You can leave a comment on some of the news right from your phone. Plus, you get this podcast on your phone as well. Remember, you can leave us reviews on the Google Play Store or iTunes. It links to our other social media accounts, and so much more. Be in the know. I know you're on your phones. People are on their phones all the time. They never get off their phones. So why not just download the XFL News Hub app on your Android or iPhone today? All you need to do is go to the Google Play Store or iTunes and just type in XFL News Hub. That's XFL News Hub. Download our app on your phone today. All right, we're here with the XFL Insider, the Adam Schefter, and though it makes him uncomfortable, of XFL News, Mr. Mike Mitchell. I appreciate you coming on the program today. How's it going?
I'm doing well, Mark. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, so let's get right into it. So you had finally everything that you've talked about for the past couple months. The cities, the coaches, even some of the behind-the-scenes coaches are finally all laid out there. What did you think of the XFL's presentation, Danny and The Rock, with all this information coming out?
I think it was great the way they rolled everything out. It was pretty amazing, the reaction they got from the live crowd in Arlington. I think they were surprised by how excited people were. It's been a couple of years since they've been in that market, the XFL, even though this is new ownership. So they didn't know how people would respond. So it was a great turnout. And I think they did a very good job. You know, it could have gone a little bit sideways because they're releasing the names of the cities without actually releasing the team names, which there could have been some blowback for that. Like, who are we going to be called here? And so, but I think it was a very good job. There was a nice build up and lead up to it. And we saw with ESPN, with Sports Center, with them interviewing the coaches and the promotion there and all the showcases and the Deion Sanders stuff, and then the ESPYs, and then of course Jimmy Kimmel. So there was a nice build up to that reveal, and I think that it'll build up slowly. These are baby steps really, because there's going to be full on promotion as we get closer. And so and then, you know, as team names come and all that, and then this TV schedule and the broadcast teams are going to be announced as well and all that. Team schedules, I think it's going to pick up as we go along, and of course when they add players to the league, it's a good start for them. I know there's a lot of people out there that have been impatient and that they've been waiting for something of significance to come by, and we've been getting dribs and drabs as we go along, but we're on that road now, and it's great to see.
Now, the girl, the woman who was like the MC, she's an ESPN person. And I remember in the beginning, she mentioned something about like how in the ESPN is with the XFL. Now, one of the first in things that there's been kind of rumblings about is the XFL draft. Have you heard that it might appear on ESPN?
I'm hearing it's definitely going to be with their media partners on ESPN. I don't know if it's going to be on ESPN Plus. I don't know the length of it because, mind you, we saw this a few years ago with the XFL when they had their draft. It's a long one. It could be 50, 60 rounds. So I don't know if all of that's going to be broadcast on there. I don't know if there'll be a specific portion for quarterbacks, or I do know that there will be positional drafts. It appears that way. So from everything I'm hearing, and Laura Rutledge did a terrific job there for ESPN. And I expect, you know, I just recently saw, so I have to look into this. Brock Osweiler has just joined the ESPN broadcast team. He's a new guy to the fold there. And we saw that with the XFL in 2020. A lot of these people who work the games have basically been elevated ever since. So Kevin Burkhardt's the number one guy on Fox there with Greg Olson. They did XFL games. You know, you saw Steve Levy and others move on to Monday Night Football and all that. So I think we're going to see, you know, Laura Rutledge and other people in ESPN involved. And that's great. It lends credibility to the league. You'll see Sports Center segments and all that. And from what I've heard, I fully expect the draft to be on ESPN. Now, even Doug Whaley and Russ Giglio were on a Zoom with agents and media members earlier this week or last week as when this airs. And they basically mentioned that their draft, they're waiting for their media partners to set a date and time, which is a clear tip off that it's going to be on ESPN. Just a matter of where it's going to be, whether it be an ESPN2 or an ESPN Plus. Now, remember, in the press release for the 5-year deal with Disney, they talked about tentpole events. So tentpole events points to a draft. So no question about it. That's a tentpole event for any football league, any league, period. So I think we're going to definitely see that. And it's going to be an exciting thing to see how they do it, how they present it. We could get uniforms at that time, too, with certain players that are selected. So that could be a nice little tie in there as well.
So one of the things that you had talked about was one of the really the first coach to jump ship from the USFL to the XFL, and that would be Chris Dishman, because we saw pictures of him at an XFL event. Yet in the press release, he still wasn't mentioned as the defensive coordinator for Hines Ward's San Antonio. Is that right?
Yeah, that is no. He is joining Las Vegas with Rod Woodson.
Rod Woodson. Okay, I knew it was the Steelers guy.
As it turned out, you know, Las Vegas right now is like a to be announced team, because if you look at it, their offensive coordinator is to be announced, their defensive coordinator is to be announced, their stadium is to be announced. Yeah. So it's kind of a fascinating setup going on right now. I don't know the logistics and what's going on contractually with Chris Dishman. I have known for a long time that was going to, while I was covering the New Jersey Generals for USFLnewshub.com, that he was going to be leaving the Generals to join Rod Woodson in the XFL with Las Vegas. We've also had, it's funny enough, the Las Vegas team, their director of player personnel is Joey Clinkscales, and he was working for the Tampa Bay Bandits. So he left the USFL also to join the XFL, and he was previously the Los Angeles Wildcats director of player personnel back in the XFL in 2020. So there's going to be a little bit of that. Two prominent USFL people, part of Rod Woodson's Las Vegas staff. You know, the league itself did not want to announce Rod Woodson out of fairness to him, and they didn't.
You're talking about Chris Dishman?
Well, yeah, exactly. Chris Dishman. The XFL itself did not want to announce Chris Dishman's hire while the USFL season was going on, and nor did the coach want to make that announcement while he's coaching players in another league. So I don't know why the league, I don't know what technicalities are going on. I don't know if they're waiting on that for certain paperwork or what have you. I don't know exactly. But Chris Dishman for a long time now has agreed to join. Just a question of them officially announcing it. Dwayne Taylor is supposed to be the offensive coordinator for Rod Woodson. He's currently working at Alabama A&M. He's one of the best on that level. He's one of the best offensive coordinators in the nation. And coincidentally, he coached Akil Glass, player who just recently worked out for the XFL at the showcase in Jackson. So you can kind of connect the dots there, and you wonder if Akil Glass is going to be part of the Las Vegas franchise there. So in Las Vegas, very unique setup right now. No offensive coordinator named. And no defensive coordinator named at the moment, and no stadium. We'll get to that sooner or later. My expectation is that Allegiant Stadium will be the host of the Las Vegas XFL franchise. Sooner or later, that's going to be announced.
Interesting. So one of the things you talked about, in our Anthony Miller covered that for us at XFL News Hub, this player contract thing. And then we had Mark Cast and all the guys from XFL News Hub were out there. And something about Rod Woodson had said, or something that given the impression that the XFL players are not going to be locked into their contracts. Have you heard anything about that? They're basically and they're basically letting them roam free. Like you play one season and you can go play with the USFL if you wanted to. I'm
working on that right now. I don't know if they're going to have that set up. in terms of allowing them to go to the CFL or USFL or what have you. If you're an XFL player and you're making more in the XFL than you are in the USFL, I don't know why you would want to go to another league and make less money.
Yeah.
So that's, it's always possible, but maybe you have a particular coach you like or something like that. But the pay is not significantly more in terms of the average player. Now, I do know that the non-quarterbacks, the top end quarterbacks that the league does sign and assign to their teams are going to be making six figures and above, similar to the XFL in 2020, where we had two quarterbacks who actually made close to $1 million. And there were three others that made over $500,000.
Do you know who those quarterbacks were?
I do. Now, this is why it's a crapshoot. I'll tell you. This is why it's a crapshoot sometimes. You think you're adding, quality veterans, and they just don't pan out. So the two highest paid quarterbacks in the XFL in 2020 were Landry Jones and Matt McGloin.
Oh, boy. There you go.
And so Landry got hurt. He had a couple of nice games, but he didn't live up to expectations there. He had a nice game against LA where he threw for over 300 yards and all that, but it was kind of a disappointment there. But you can understand why Landry ended up with Bob Stoops. After all, Stoops coached him in Oklahoma. So,
yeah.
And Jones had a very good college career. So anyhow, McGloin unfortunately didn't work out. He was a recommendation by Trip McCracken, who at the time was the personnel guy for the Guardians. He worked with the Kansas City Chiefs, John Peterson, I believe, too. And Andy Reid recommended Matt McGloin to Kevin Gilbride and the Guardians. And it seemed at the time, let's get a good veteran backup Northeast guy. You've respected. He'll do a good job, teaching these younger guys how to be a professional, go through meetings, game film, all that. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for McGloin there. Now, some of the other quarterbacks, Josh Johnson, PJ Walker, these guys were paid well. I don't know the exact specifics of their contract, but they were paid well into six figures. And the reason why it was done as well was to prevent them from jumping ship to the NFL, because those two players had standing offers to join NFL rosters. The Steelers were hot and heavy on PJ Walker.
Really?
And during, if people remember this, in 2019, the Lions had injuries at their quarterback position and tried to sign Josh Johnson, but because of the XFL contract not allowing their assigned quarterbacks, top tier quarterbacks, to go to the NFL until the XFL season is over, Josh couldn't join. Josh is still in the NFL now, backing up Russell Wilson in Denver. So he did a tremendous job for the Jets and the Ravens last year, throwing for over 300 yards in each appearance. So I'm happy for him. Quality quarterback. It goes to show you. Even in the AAF, they had Johnson as the first overall pick in their draft. So you're going to see quarterbacks like that. It may seem crazy to some people to pay a quarterback $500,000, $600,000 and all that, but you're competing against, the possibility of not only these players latching on with NFL teams, but also on practice squads. Even practice squad salaries have gone up. So a player would rather make less and be in a practice squad with the hope that they'll get into an NFL game and get onto an NFL roster than try out a secondary league. So sometimes you have to sweeten the pot for certain players. It won't be for every one of them. I don't think the Russ Giglio and Doug Willie and all these guys want to overpay for quarterbacks. But if a certain one comes up that they feel could be a difference maker, it would not shock me if someone gets close to $1 million. That's the difference between the USFL and the XFL. Unless they change and I know Fox has funding and they're trying to raise funding up to 200 million. Unless the USFL decides to go that route and compete directly for those type of quarterbacks and pay six figures and all that, the XFL is going to have an edge in that range. And then the non-quarterback is going to be making $59,000. Now that's an average, because there's some players are going to make more. On average, the players are going to make that, but some players are going to make more depending on how much they win. And then obviously the six-figure quarterbacks, if they win bonuses and everything else, will make more than what their contract says initially.
So have you heard any names that might be out there that the XFL might look at as far as quarterbacks in the future? I mean, I assume Landry, we saw Cardell Jones appear in the last Texas player thing. Maybe, the whole Sonic 2 has kind of changed. It came out, it kind of broke the curse. All you insiders, XFL people know what I'm talking about. Is he on the table? Is
I would say
like Landry Jones on the table, or
right? We're in August now when this airs, so I'll say pay attention to NFL rosters right now, because all those quarterback battles, the guys who are the third, fourth, fifth guy on the depth chart. Because the last time the XFL ran, in 2019 when they were getting ready for their draft. The players they ended up signing, their best players were all on NFL rosters in the summer of 2019. They ended up, that's the Jordan Teamos, the PJ Walkers, the Cam Phillips, the Donald Parhams, etc., James Butler, etc., etc., etc. So right now, if you look at NFL rosters, if you go to ourlads.com or go to whatever site you go to and you check out the depth charts and you start looking at those quarterbacks, I would say, even though he just signed, I would look out for a guy like Josh Rosen. If he somehow does not land on a practice squad or a roster, he'd be somebody who's definitely a target, the XFL. One player that I know is a target, and perhaps by the time I say this, he ends up on an NFL roster, is Garrett Gilbert. So Garrett Gilbert was recently released by the Raiders. They've had a lot of different transactions on the back end of their roster at quarterback, and Gilbert obviously was a star in the AAF, and he's been in the NFL ever since. There was a sequence last year with Washington where on the same roster was Taylor Heineke, Garrett Gilbert, and Jordan Teamo. When the Commanders were getting ready to play, it's pretty hilarious, all those spring league quarterbacks on the same roster at the same time. And Gilbert started and did pretty well. He has ties to Russ Giglio, who's in the XFL right now, one of the top personnel guys in the XFL, and Giglio is responsible for signing him. So I think players like Garrett Gilbert, who have direct ties to the personnel department in the XFL, are going to be the types of players and quarterbacks that XFL 3.0 signs and assigns to their teams.
And so what was your thoughts on the USFL season as it came to a close, kind of overall? I mean, because there's a lot of guys we keep seeing now, a lot of these USFL guys are getting signed. Mike, I'm curious if these guys did sign that, that option for the second year, because now they have to get released from their contracts so that they can try out in the USFL. And now do you see, I mean, I guess first off, like, what did you think of the USFL season and these guys moving on to the NFL?
It affirms my belief. It confirms my belief in that spring football has validity, and it's valuable and it's important. And so the AAF was over 40 plus guys who signed on with the NFL when that league ended. And then the XFL was 57, and there's over 24 XFL players currently on NFL rosters. So to see now the number keeps growing as I'm speaking, I think it's like 25 now. So it's tremendous. So it just, validates anybody who is an advocate for these leagues that there's talent out there. And I thought the USFL, as far as their season goes, it was quality football. It got better as the season went along. I was happy for the league and the players and the coaches that were involved, and I think they did a good job. There are things you can nitpick overall in terms of their football structure, in terms of their business structure and all that, but they completed a season. They're headed to a year 2, which is awesome. Teams are in off-season mode right now, adding players to their off-season roster, which is going to be 75. They'll go back to 40 plus 10 in the regular season next year, but that's nice to see. There'll be a draft at the beginning of 2023, much smaller, obviously, than the crazy draft that we had a few months back. So I was impressed with the USFL. I'm happy the way it came off. Like I said, there were certain aspects that maybe I thought, left a lot to be desired, but overall, the existence of this type of league is tremendous for the football landscape. So, and it's pretty crazy that we're heading into a world now where the XFL and USFL, 2 separate prominent spring pro football leagues, are going to be existing in the same space. It's pretty awesome.
And now you have these guys. I mean, now it gives us, I remember when we were excited when the XFL players made it to rosters and we go, we can watch. Well, they didn't even know if the NFL had a preseason at that point because it was what was going on. Now we have these USFL players. Is the thinking that these guys are going to stick with the practice squad? Or do you think like a lot of these 25 guys that maybe, a bunch of them will get cut and then they're technically free agents? Do you think they might make their way to the XFL?
It's kind of a gray area there, because initially a lot of the USFL players that signed the initial contract during draft time, there was an option clause in there, but there were some players and agencies that decided not to opt in. So you had an option. The USFL amended their contract as the season went along to create a clause where you had to, in order to sign a contract, you automatically were opting in. So that's a gray area. I don't know for sure how many of these players that are on NFL rosters now that just played in the USFL, how many of them are going to be free to go to the XFL. That's a mystery right now, something I don't know. In terms of the USFL players being on NFL rosters and making it, you know, there are some things in their favor, especially if you're a special team standout like Avante Turpin, who I covered this past season at USFLnewshub.com. I think he's got a very good chance to be a star on special teams and to contribute on offense. So I that's great for the league. If you're turning on NFL games and this guy's making big plays, which I think he's going to, it's going to basically, that's a selling point for the entire USFL. It's a selling point to players, agents come play in our league. Look what happened. And now with the practice squads expanded, with the flexibility that NFL rosters have, I think that's going to help guys stick onto rosters. If it's not the 53, then on the practice squad.
Now, you talk to a lot of agents, speaking of these contracts. So now you had the XFL contract out, the USFL contract. What's the kind of sense that you're getting from players and agents when it comes to the two leagues?
You know, there's a lot of agents that prefer the XFL because of the calendar, because their season ends in April and May, and it gives players not only more time to latch on to NFL teams, but it also gives players an opportunity to recover physically. Now, we'll see what happens with some of the USFL players that are in NFL camps now. But when you play a full 10, 12-week season, and then you go directly into an NFL training camp and try to play the season, it's not impossible for these superb athletes to do that, but it makes it much more difficult. You don't have recovery time. So, and also, you know, you have an opportunity because this point of the year, we'll see with the USFL, the more the merrier. Hopefully 40, 50, 60 guys get signed. You never know. But we'll see if they're able to get in that 50 range, 57 range. They may not. Camps have just started. We'll see. There'll be injuries and all that. But a lot of the agents I spoke to prefer the pay in the XFL. They like the fact that a lot of these players are playing in states where they're tax friendly. So that helps with the players. They get more of their money back. They like the setup of the XFL, the ownership and all that. So there's, you know, the XFL still has to go out and prove themselves, the product and all that. But a lot of agents are very bullish on the XFL. They're valued, the timing of the calendar, who's involved, the money, all that, all those things are, you know, a factor. The USFL is a viable option too in all of this now. So I'm not saying that they're not, but from the agents that I've spoken to, they're leaning a little bit more towards the XFL side.
Now, as far as the XFL goes, have you heard anything about TV shows? Or I mean, we heard Danny Garcia talk about this round the clock kind of content stuff. I know you were the one that's been really kind of talking about, actually, out of everything that you've talked about, the one thing that we have yet to see, which clearly we wouldn't see right this second, is this kind of some kind of XFL TV show. Have you been hearing anything, a buzz about anything of that stuff going on?
You know, a big part of all this, and I will say this, I have, you know, they mentioned this during the Arlington press conference on Monday, how everything is set up in Arlington is also going to involve $7 and the Garcia companies involved, the production. We know they've been filming stuff all along here. We've seen that, you know, some of the reels and all that. We know Jay Rothman, who for many years worked college football, Monday Night Football, is basically the head of video production and production with the XFL. They also talked about a content creation center and all that. And then we've also heard about tentpole events and all that. So it remains to be seen. We're going to get a lot of content. We're going to get a lot of behind the scenes content with players, coaches, all that. Remains to be seen whether it be a traditional documentary, although a lot of stuff's been filmed. I think we're going to get a lot of behind the scenes stuff for each individual team. The question is, how will it be formatted? How will it be set up? And, you know, the big thing with somebody like Dwayne Johnson and Danny Garcia doing, you'll see them in all these things, by the way, the behind the scenes stuff, the documentary stuff, but essentially focusing on Dwayne every single show. You know, as him as the main character, it's a reality show, but as the main character you follow, that's a little bit difficult with Dwayne Johnson's schedule. I'm not saying that won't happen. That's definitely been discussed, but they've already given hints this past week about amping up the content creation 24 hours a day, basically, players connecting with fans and video stuff and all this content that they're going to be putting out on their social media, you know, websites. And it stands to reason if they have any behind the scenes stuff, that it'll be with their partners through Disney, which is Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, most likely. So it's going to be interesting. We haven't heard a big announcement in terms of a documentary show, but they've already hinted that there's going to be a lot of content that's going to be behind the scenes related.
And so, you know, with fans being as fickle as they are, cool, the cities are announced, whatever's announced. Well, when are the team names? When are the team names? So what are you hearing as far as team names goes? That's probably the number one question you get asked.
You know, you've mentioned it for so long on XFLNewsHub.com that you weren't expecting anything until August. So here we are, right?
Yep.
So I think we're going to get something in this month in terms of the team names and the logos and the colors and all that.
This month, August.
That's what I think, you know.
Oh,
so I
okay.
mean, it's possible, maybe it's so I think we're going to get something on that. In terms of uniforms and all that, I'm not so sure, but you know, in terms of if that will be along with the package, but we'll see. But they've been working on it for a long time. I mean, they closed up XFL shop and the team merchandise for several months now. And so my expectation from everything that I've heard, and perhaps there's some changes here and there, but that the 5 returning cities will all have their same names. Now, whether or not they'll have the same logos and some tweaks here and there based on legalities and copyright stuff, the issues that they had from the previous league, that remains to be seen. But I do think we're going to see, and I'm hopeful of this, obviously, the Battlehawks, the Defenders, and all those other great teams, the Renegades, the Roughnecks, and of course, the Dragons.
All my merch.
So there we go. I mean, why would you want to abandon that? I know that the Redbird and everybody got an excellent deal on the XFL. They bought it for only 15 million. It ended up being whatever 20+ million, whatever, when they had to deal with a whole bunch of other stuff in terms of the cost of purchasing it. But you know, you have awesome brands already in place, like that DC Defender shield you have there, like the Battlehawk. So I could see some alterations and tweaks to the uniforms, and maybe some alterations and tweaks in terms of the overall look of the logo, maybe a little bit changes here and there, but I expect those names to be back. The fun stuff is, and that's fun in and of itself, but the fun stuff is finding out what San Antonio is called, what Las Vegas is called, what Orlando is called. And so that is going to be the most interesting of all the elements. It's going to be fascinating. Once they do that, once you have actual identities attached, I think you can really start to move forward in terms of selling merchandise, another stream of revenue and all that, but also in getting these markets attached to you. If it's the Las Vegas Diamonds or the whatever San Antonio Scorpions, you know, all this kind of stuff, it's much easier to attach yourself to that than XFL San Antonio. So it'll be interesting, fascinating to see.
And it's so scheduled. Do you think that in like that rule book, all that's going to follow the same timeline as the other iteration? That stuff is not going to come for a while, or you?
I think I don't know. I don't have a definitive date. I wish I did on that. I think there was a mention this week of the rules being completed, whether or not they roll that out. Danny Garcia, I think, mentioned that on the Markcast, that the rules are done, that they had league meetings last Saturday about it. So Rush Giglio and Dean Blandino and those guys they're definitely going to be, they're definitely going to roll that out in pretty soon. I would say within the next month or so, I will hear about that as well. The interesting thing about rules, that I think about it, I don't want to belabor this point too much, but obviously the USFL used a lot of the XFL rules. They had the same XFL draft, the positional draft. They did a lot of that stuff, the overtime, the point conversions, all that. The XFL might come up with some interesting and unique rules that we haven't thought of yet. And then you just wonder, can't really copyright rules if the USFL goes, oh, I like that, I'll take that. Yeah, so true. How secretive do you want to be with certain things that you want to, put out there for the public? But Russ Brandon also mentioned that they would be releasing the rules and explaining them. And I'm sure there'll be a big presentation by Dean Blandino to kind of break down all the rules, kind of like what we had in the XFL in 2020 when they had all the videos on YouTube and all that stuff on their social media that explained everything. So that's going to be fun too, to see how much they retain. Now, because they're testing rules for the NFL, which is part of their collaboration with the NFL, I do expect them to have the cream of the crop in terms of NFL suggestions, things the NFL wants to try but can't, and that the XFL is going to try. So there's a little bit of a collaboration there. So how much of XFL 2020 do we get? How much of the NFL's desired rules for their future do we get? And then, of course, I think the league is mostly going to be NFL-based rules, but there'll be certain things here and there.
So last two questions. One, I know that they were mentioned that the XFL scouts would be at NFL camps. Were they that way in 2020? Were there XFL scouts at those camps also?
There was.
Okay.
There was. As a matter of fact, Cardell Jones was somebody that was like scouted by Norm Chow and others, and Pep Hamilton. So, and right now I saw AJ Smith, who's Houston's offensive coordinator under Wade Phillips, who was also with Houston 2 years ago. He's recently at the Chargers camp. looking at players there. So that Doug Whaley mentioned it as well, that all the XFL personnel people are going to be at NFL camps. It's a fun time if you're a fan of the XFL or USFL. These preseason games have a lot more importance than they normally do for these. Yeah, so am I. I mean, I can't wait. Just as a CFL guy and an NFL guy too, and as a Jets guy, I'm anxious to see Chris Streveler play in the preseason for the Jets. He's such a character. So we'll see what happens with him. But beyond that, from an XFL standpoint, USFL standpoint, a lot of these players that you see in that final preseason game and during the preseason games are going to be in the XFL. A large portion, the XFL worked out 1,300 players, showcases, thereabouts, maybe a little bit more than that. And a good portion of those guys will be in the league, no question about it. They find some gems, some diamonds in the rough, no question. But a large portion of the XFL rosters are going to come from the nearly 700 players that are cut in September by NFL teams. It's probably 654. They're about 670. Those are the amount of players that are not going to be on the 53 that did not make the practice squad either. So it's going to be close to 700 players. So you're fielding a league of 400 plus players, whatever the case may be. The XFL is going to have a good chunk of those guys that don't make NFL teams. And I think that's one quick thing I want to note. This draft has been pushed back to November for a specific reason, to give more time for cut players from the NFL to make the jump to the XFL, because what happens with a lot of these guys who get cut, who don't make practice squads in the 53, what they do is they wait on the sidelines for another NFL opportunity. A lot of agents will tell their players, wait till there's injuries, maybe you'll get back on, wait it out. But as a month and 2 months goes by, then you can kind of see whether or not there's an opening for you. And it helps you better decide whether you want to go to the XFL or not. If you see that you're not getting any interest in the NFL, workouts are dried up, you know what, I'm going to give the XFL a shot. So the XFL is also going to have drafts in December and in January, supplemental drafts right before camp starts. So they have a 5-week camp in January. So that's going to be fascinating. These players who I have great interest in and I followed closely, and through college and everything else, watching them in the preseason. I'm a nut to begin with who loves preseason games. I'm going to love them even more this summer.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Final question. Now that we have all these cities in place, are we going to get these team presidents come back now that it's kind of like, okay, we're going to set up shop? I've seen things where there is going to be a local element to these teams. The players and coaches might not be here during the season, but there definitely be boots on the ground in every city promoting the league. Are we going to see team presidents back in the fold?
I've been asking about that for quite some time now. In the early stages, I've been told that there wouldn't be, but you figure if you're going to do anything locally beyond because each team has 5 home games in their markets. So you figure beyond the 5 home games, you'd like to do things with the community. Now, I know with social media nowadays, you can connect with people much better than you could in the past. You don't necessarily have to do everything. You can connect with your markets through that, but it would be great if they did a little more, boots on the ground, so to speak, to sell tickets and all that. So we'll see where that goes, but I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we're here with XFL Insider, the GOAT. I saw somebody put your picture up there, and it was a goat.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Real goat. But hey, Mike, I appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch as we get closer to kickoff.
Thank you so much, Mark, for having me on. These are exciting times for all of us who are fans of pro football.
All right, my friends, we are back talking with our main man, Mike Mitchell. Went a little long with the podcast today, but what's up? I just want to say hello to everybody in the chat room. Timmy says, bring back the Chicago Enforcers. The name of the team in Vegas should be the Vegas Outlaws. Alan says, go with the Vegas Outlaws. Nicholas says, ready for XFL Town Hall. Was fun. Can't wait to go back to Texas Live for the draft in November. Do you think they're going to have it again? That would be cool if they did. There is some rumblings that ESPN will cover something when it comes to the XFL draft. It's not going to be like the USFL or the XFL draft of old. There's rumblings, but we're not sure about that. Jose says the San Antonio Thunderbirds would be an awesome name, which honors the Air Force. If based in San Antonio, it would make awesome rivalry between the Battlehawks and Thunderbirds. That's true, too. I like that one. He said the Primetime Fry says the Jags versus Raiders. That's what it is. Jaguars. Hey, Jaguars is like my third team. I got a Jaguars hat right over there. It's my like third. So you have I'm a Ravens fan. See, this is the whole thing with America culture. Like it's either you're like if you're not in the same political party, you can't be friends. If you can't like if you don't like the same thing as somebody else, then you get all pissed off about it. It's like, oh, my friends are Republican or my friend's a Democrat and I hate them, and they're like this like divisive stuff. So my wife is a Steelers fan and I'm a Ravens fan, and we get along just fine. We have people in my house that are Republicans and Democrats. We get along fine. So you can too. But our third kind of neutral team is the Jaguars. So that's where I was going with that. Philip says, so nice to finally see real XFL talk. Go Roughnecks. Yeah, I agree with that. Richard Humphrey says, I can't wait till the XFL season starts. Me too. Super excited. Richard says, San Antonio Rough Riders. Ooh, that would piss off some CFL people there. Let's see what else. Who else is in here? This chat. Lots of chat going on. BC Dance Studio says MLFB is losers. Yeah, it's kind of my thing. Van Hurst says big drain on CFL talent pool. The ratio will not be an issue in 2023. Let's see here. Nicholas says the XFL should take a popular name that the Washington fans of the NFL wanted and with that Las Vegas Red Wolves. I think that would be a great name. We'll have to find out with all the red name. And Jared says, thanks for the interview. Let's see if Slaughter gets on the Jags. Oh, that's true too. Kyle Slaughter, the MVP he was in the beginning kind of the MVP candidate until Turpin kind of took over. But Slaughter was looking great in the beginning when he got an NFL look. So he's on the Jaguars. So it'll be fun to see him. And that's the thing. These preseason games, my friend, have so much different meaning now because of the XFL, USFL component. Because these guys that are playing in these games could wind up playing in the XFL. So you want to kind of watch preseason games now. I'm super excited. I hope to go to a Ravens preseason game. Let's get to some social media real quick. And then we got some phone calls, etc. Major League Football misses hotel payment, players locked out. Lots of traction on this story. Gary says, I suppose you could say we saw this coming, but really sucks for the players. To just leave them hanging like that, could have at least let them know and given them a way to get home. I totally agree. Dara says, I hope the XFL is successful this goes around. I enjoyed the Vince version, to be honest. Nolan says, what league? Never heard of them until now. Yeah, a lot of people didn't hear of the league, but that's what we follow. About the XFL, what do you think the XFL will announce logo and team names? Let us know in the comments real quick. Jordan says, I have a ton of Dragons gear, so I hope they stay with that. But I did the Las Vegas Outlaws hat and shirt combo. Could be torn fandom. Joseph says, if history is any guide, months away at best, which is a mistake because fans outside the host cities typically need some sort of brand identity to choose the team to follow. Once fans decide on a team or have a choice at least, they'll pay more attention into the info content otherwise that comes out over time. It is almost insulting when these leagues try to sell super generic XFL, San Antonio, etc. gears. They did that last time. I get what you're saying. He makes a little point there. But, I mean, everybody wants it now. They want to trickle it out. This is kind of a dead zone right now for attention. So that's why I think they're doing it now. The real attention will come soon as we get into, like, September. Brady says, as long as DC will be the defenders, they can take as long as they want for the unveil. There you go. Nate says, hoping sooner rather than later, but I'm sure they need to make sure they have all their ducks in a row. Is there a reason why there's speculation on defenders making a name change? There was something, I don't know. Leonard says August. Michael says October. I was leaning towards September, but, October is where I was leaning, but I could be wrong. XFL got substantial income, that whole deal. Kenny says, I think people don't understand just how much The Rock is a business guy. Yes, he's a wrestler, actor, but unlike Hogan, who was about check and his ego, Rock, if you listen or read interviews, talk about surrounding yourself with family and people who know what they're doing. He took his time to build the operations part of the XFL before hiring coaches and naming teams. I feel better about the future than, say, USFL or other startup groups. Rickard said, okay, Disney's about to buy the XFL and a few watch. No, they won't buy it. They have too much stuff going on. They're not going to buy the XFL. They don't need to. They can just partner with The Rock. And that's the thing. The one thing to think about with The Rock is his family. If you've ever watched the show, I want to say Project Rock, Young Rock on NBC, you see, I mean, his mom had business, and his grandmother and grandfather all had that business acumen, and then you got Danny Garcia and her background. So, I mean, they're kind of a good combo there. Just something to keep in mind. That he's got a family of, big, personalities and business acumen. It's in the blood. It's in the mana. But the XFL USFL player salary, David says the plan is already unaffordable to finish the entire season. Okay. Joan Key Troutman, one of them is destined to fail, and the other one will just languish in relative obscurity. Great business model. Veronica says, love to see them merge. Yeah, I agree with that. I think, people are like, oh, it's going to fail, and they're all going to fail. Trust, these guys have the money. Don't worry about it. It's year 2, year 3, that's where you get into, and I've said this in one of the other articles I wrote, who's willing to lose money? That's the other factor there. When do you think the XFL will announce logos? Russell the Truth Sticker, great question. I hope real soon. I want to buy some specific team gear. Me too. Old man wee in about 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe you want to change your name. But okay. That's okay. On to the Twitter real quick about the XFL announcing logo and team names. Dino, Green Ranger dons in either later this month or fall, September to November. That's pretty much everything, but some people think later this month. I'm going to stick with October. I'm sticking with October. Marquette King, you remember him, he's a punter. He's a great punter in the XFL for the Battlehawks. He put a thing up. It said, should I play XFL in February? This survey will determine the outcome. I thought this was awesome for him to do it. He is such a personality. I don't know why he's not in the NFL. I've seen videos of this guy kicking punts, and it is unbelievable. Like, he's kicking them, and it's like hitting like lamp posts and all sorts of stuff. So he put a vote to 4,409 votes. 91.6% said yes. And then at Mr. Revibes says, would love you in Lou, my guy, one of the best punters in the game. Yeah, he is a personality that the XFL, he's got a yes. He's the type of guy. I was surprised he wasn't showing up in the USFL, but the XFL with The Rock and his personality and, and what they want to build up, he would be somebody they would focus. And he's just a punter. But remember, there's another punter, just a punter from the NFL days that played for the the Indianapolis Colts, who is now, I listen to his show every day. So Pat McAfee. So there you go. And did you see this? So The Rock was hanging out at a New York Red Bulls game. Now, there was always talk about the Red Bulls potentially and the New York Guardians playing at that Red Bull Stadium. So it's just kind of random showed up there. Would make a nice place for the Guardians. And then Guzzo Congo says, after 2025, got to crawl before you walk. Absolutely, brother. You got to crawl before you walk. Totally agree with you there. I was just like, and that is way too early. Let's see here. All right, let's get to the emails first. Let's take first phone call, shall we?
Hey, Mr. Perry. Calling in for you to play this message hopefully next week on your podcast. All the best, by the way. I noticed in the live stream at Texas Live, The Rock and Danny Garcia said we would have some opportunities to make this our league and shape the league. Danny Garcia used the words co-create. Now, I don't exactly know what that means. I don't know if we're going to be able to choose logos or we're going to be able to choose, uniform styles. But I'm really hoping that it's nothing more than that. I'm really hoping that maybe we get to choose like the new logos and maybe the uniforms for the 3 new cities that they just added. But I really don't want to leave it up to the league to choose the names because that could be a terrible decision if we leave it up to people to choose these names because we'll end up with crazy names. And I believe the CFL did that with the Ottawa Red Blacks and we all know how that is. They're about the worst team in that league. And so, I don't know. I don't want to leave it up to a bunch of random fans to choose the names. I just hope it's maybe a uniform or two, maybe a logo. Leave the names up to the professionals because they obviously have done the test market for these names, and just don't change any of the existing names for like the St. Louis team, obviously the teams that we already have established fan bases on, but maybe choose, maybe have some co-creation opportunities, as Danny likes to say, with the newer team. But I want to know your opinion. What exactly do you think?
All right. Appreciate the phone call, my brother. God bless. Thanks for calling in. Co-creating stuff, you definitely can't do the logos or the team name. I mean, you could get away with the logos, but the team names you couldn't because there's so much trademark and all sorts of stuff going on with that. So I would let them take care of, the team names, whatever. That's fine. Don't get the fans involved with that. Though it would create a definite buzz, but they got to, start making uniforms and all sorts of stuff going on right now. I'm curious of what that means about co-create, but I think that goes with the players and like as we get closer to the season. I don't think it's those kind of things. Maybe voting on some rules. Do you want to keep these rules? Do you not want to keep these rules? I mean, they're not going to be like a full, fan-controlled football type thing. But definitely, I'm curious what that meant because I think it's very difficult to do names and logos. However, but then at the same time, picking rules, I'm not really sure, but it's definitely something out there that is intriguing. And we all, these little teases, I think are good and gets fans wondering what they mean. I'm not really sure what the co-create thing stands for. All right, let's go to an email. Jeremiah says, so basically now we have confirmation. Now everything's you've reported. Well, that's Mike Mitchell, which is great. I think we all wanted more news, but this is a good thing. I'm very excited about being able to get back into football. I love the NFL. However, the reason I love football so much is that there is only 16 games a season. We could really get involved and not miss anything. What has driven me away is it takes 3 hours to show a 1 hour game. The XFL only has 8 teams and 10 games, gives you a chance to get very involved. We're hearing from them. We will all get more behind the scenes stories, etc. Basically more involved is what's going on. What all do you expect to see, and what would you and the XFL News Hub fans like to see? Well, I think first off, definitely some kind of behind-the-scenes TV show. I think there's going to be things that are kind of going to pump up the players and kind of make them household names. I think that's going to be exciting. I mean, Ballers, there was talk of like, would they do like a Ballers, like a TV show? I don't know about that. Where it's involved with XFL things. Like, I don't know. I mean, but you get the sense from ESPN that they're seeing something unique that is very intriguing to them when it comes to what Danny Garcia, $7 Entertainment is kind of bringing to the table. And that's the part where, and she said about it being a year-round brand. Now, you just said there's 8 teams, there's 10 games. It's not a full year worth of content, but they kind of want to make it a year-round brand. And how do you do that? But, behind the scenes, I mean, there's, the NFTs and collectibles, and I don't know what else. I really do think that they have stuff that we're not even considering yet is kind of, stuff that we haven't dreamed up of yet. And I think it's going to be exciting, and it's just going to make the league that much more interesting between co-creating with fans, whatever that means. Or is this just a bunch of corporate mumbo-jumbo talk, which is also annoying too. But definitely some kind of TV show year-round. It would be fantastic if it was on prime time. The USFL did it with their television show that was produced by NFL Films, and it was a good show, and I watched every episode. Having it on just before the games was kind of meh. If you could have gotten that on prime time. But again, USFL is taking baby steps. The XFL is going to come out big and hot from the beginning. We'll see who lasts. 3 years is the goal, that these leagues last at least 3 years. That's what we want. We'll have to just wait and see. But we're getting closer and closer, 200 days from kickoff, which is, it's far. It's still far. But we've come so far when the league shut down 2 years ago. So, To the next. Don says, caw, happy to officially hear the XFL is back in St. Louis for 2023. During the town hall presentation, they said they are listening to the fans and want our input. It seems apparent that this ownership group wants to make changes for the sake of putting their own spin on things. For example, the XFL logo. I actually prefer the old logo, but the new one is fine, assuming that they can still use it after copyright lawsuit is settled. True. I don't think there's a problem with that. There are a couple of things that I hope that they do not take it upon themselves to change simply because they can. First of all, the rules. XFL 2.0 had several rule innovations, many with player safety first and foremost in mind. I agree with you. The two rules I hope to remain the same as the punt and kickoff rules. Both of these rules made the game safer while making it more exciting than the NFL. Kickoffs in the NFL are boring because it is in the kicking team's best interest to simply kick the ball past the end zone for a touchback. No real play. Boring. Punt returns in the NFL have the highest percentage of injuries due to the high speed impacts as soon as the receiver touches the ball. The XFL 2.0 rules address both of these issues in a way that made the game safer and more exciting at the same time. If the XFL 3.0 is going to be a place for the NFL to evaluate rules, then I hope these two rules makes the cut. I agree with you there because they didn't even give it a chance. I mean, we need to see the XFL 2.0 rules through a whole season. I would say don't touch it. Leave the rules as they are, and let's see how it goes through a whole season. Up next, he said, team names. New ownership has been very quiet about the team names. Hell, it took them over a year just to say the cities. There have been reports that DC will not be the Defenders. I'm leaning towards that it might still be the Defenders. There are rumors and concerns that St. Louis won't be the Battlehawks. I am fairly certain it will be the Battlehawks. That would be dumb to change it, to be honest. To be honest. If they change the name of the St. Louis team, then I am strongly recommending that all Battlehawk fans continue to wear Battlehawk attire, and we continue the Battlehawks cheer. There was something really special to hear 10,000 fans on the west side of the Dome yell battle, followed by 10,000 fans on the east side yell Hawks. If the new ownership listens, they will say that then St. Louis should be the Battlehawks. Yeah, I would be stunned, and it would be a big mistake if they do not keep the name Battlehawks. Take care and hope to see you in St. Louis. Me too. I would like to see you too, Mr. Don. God bless. P.S. We have a group of 16 that have already put down $50 to reserve our seats. All right, but man, I'm hoping that the XFL 3.0 can accommodate us like the 2.0 did and getting our seats together. I have heard that they are giving preferential treatment to the XFL 2.0 season ticket holders and, working with them. So I have a feeling they'll be great when it comes to that stuff. So there you go. Don checking in. Appreciate you, Don. God bless. Thanks for the message. Our man Paladin sending in some pictures. He had to kickstart Project XFL News Hub early. Team soon to be purchased. This stroke of luck was on sale. Here's the refs for Mark's DC Defenders currently. Very cool. Very cool pictures from Paladin Demo checking in with his work for the DC Defenders. Hopefully, I would be mad if they didn't call them the DC Defenders. All right, let's take our final phone call.
Good afternoon, Mark, Mike, and everybody else at the News Hub, maybe even Reed. If we look back to August 21st, 2019, we would see Oliver Luck introducing 18 names and logos. The sad part about the whole deal is he allows Laura Rutledge to introduce 2 of them. In 2023, neither of those teams is slated to be part of the XFL. I'm going to go ahead and go with August 21st, 2022 as being the next introduction of the team name and colors, just as a piece of history. Have a great day.
Oh, all right. I like the little prediction. He's throwing it down. He's giving a specific date. What do you think about that? I think that that's quite possible. I don't know, man. I was thinking October. Mike Mitchell is talking about in the next couple weeks, like in August, like soon. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll find out, though. We will find out. But thanks for the phone call. Appreciate it. Appreciate everybody, including everybody in the chat room. Ron says, I don't know USFL or XFL if interested in Tennessee or Kentucky. No. Mike G, CFL will be just fine. I don't see any of their guys going south for lower paying jobs. the CFL pays more, but the taxes are more, and because of the conversion rate, and you're also playing like double the games than you are playing in the XFL and getting tape. I would be interested to see if, because remember the CFL season ends, I think, sometime in November. That would be tough to play a full CFL season and then come down to the States and play in the XFL. But I wonder if some of those guys who, had 2-year contracts with the CFL wind up kind of making their way down to the XFL. That's something we're going to have to see there. Jared said Slaughter had 3 interceptions, 0 TDs for some games, LOL. Yeah, he was hurt. He was hurt for a lot of the season. Jared also said all the haters like to not talk in the end of the season after it's completed. Kevin Hart says, how are you promoting BIPOC at every level? The XFL from front. I don't understand, especially for Native. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what that is. Aaron says King is legendary with Raiders fans. The NFL didn't like his personality, though he is super talented. Agreed. I'd love to have him there. Jared says John Gruden got rid of him. Broncos picked him up. I forget what happened with him. He made a video bashing John Gruden. Well, we see what happened with John Gruden. Brian says the XFL is back, and the Chief says it's possible the XFL can expand. Absolutely. They will. They could expand. And remember, we have one of the people involved with the XFL that was later pulled say that, LA and New York are not off the table. This is just the first season. And I think if everything goes according to plan and the XFL does really well, I think in season 2, you could potentially re-add the LA Wildcats and New York team back in the mix. And then, maybe that's why The Rock is scouting, because they're already thinking about next season. Now that they've made announcements, it's going to be ticket sales and revenue and all this stuff. It's got to be, you just got to get that first year under your belt. And then I think a lot of these cities will be like, hey, let's make a deal with you. We can do this and that to really kind of have, something great going on there. So that is that. All right, my friends, appreciate everybody in the chat room hanging out with us. It's been a long show. Let's wrap this thing up. Because it's been a long show. Appreciate Mike Mitchell, the GOAT, XFL Insider Mike Mitchell, for being part of the program. Remember, if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@XFL News Hub with your thoughts, or record an MP3 or video on your phone. Leave a voicemail, 888-430-7692, extension 3. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it on the show. And remember to watch XFL Weekend Review live at 8 p.m. Eastern every Monday, and we appreciate that there as well. All right, my friends, have a great week. Stay tuned to XFL News Hub, where we got more MLFB stuff coming on there. Working on some great interviews to bring to you for the show. The guys like Mike Mitchell and others. Super excited. There's just a lot going on. And enjoy. And you got CFL games going on, but you also have NFL preseason start. This is your chance to check out these players that could potentially end up in the XFL or USFL for that more. And even check out USFL News Hub for USFL players. So we're going to track all the USFL players during the preseason as well. Because even if you don't like the USFL, because you got to like something and hate the other, whatever that cultural thing is, some of those USFL players could wind up in the XFL draft too. So this is an exciting time for us super nerds. The big nerds, football nerds, will come in. Also, if you want to be part of our fantasy football game, because we're going to have fantasy football, message me, podcast@XFL News Hub, if you want to be part of that. And then make sure you smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel, will you? All right, my friends, that is it for me, folks. God bless. As always, God is good. And if you ever want to talk about my path to Jesus and that whole thing, I'm always open to talk to you guys about that because God has been good in my life, and I wouldn't be here without him. So that's it for me, folks. God bless, as always, and I will see you all later.